Welcome to Artiddle. Today we are going to be doing a beginner lesson in drawing with charcoal pencils. The tools we'll be using today are first a charcoal pencil. This is a 6B, which is the darkest variety I've got. We will be using a smudger. I've got a couple different types of smudgers here just in case they get too dark. With the charcoal, I've got a white charcoal pencil. A smaller one here with an extender. It's almost sharpened to the nub. I'll be using a pointer which helps to create a finer point on the pencil for detail. I've got a few different erasers here. This is a kneaded eraser, which is really great for charcoal. Once it starts to get too black, you can just knead it up a little. And this is what it looks like in the package. We've also got a gum eraser and also a magic eraser. So as I start here, you can see that I'm using my grid drawing to reference the original picture. I've got the grids in the same proportions. I'm going to look for the places where lines intersect on the grid and start from those points. When you do that, it sometimes looks a little bit wonky where the circles aren't quite circles and the squares aren't quite squares, and that's okay. Once you've got the major shapes down, you can smooth them out a little bit. You've probably figured this out, but the video that you're watching is actually sped up a little bit faster than normal, so my hands don't typically draw that fast. One of the absolute hardest things to draw freehand is a spoon. So using the grid system here, it's really helpful to be able to see the shape of it and where the lights and darks are. You can see here now that my drawing is starting to come together a little bit that there are lines that are a little bit crooked and the circle on the top of the mug isn't quite right. I'm still not worried about that yet. Once I start going in and defining the edges a little bit more and putting the shading in, it's going to make a lot more sense. With charcoal, you can use erasers in a couple different ways. You can erase a line you messed up like I just did, or you can use them later on when you're trying to put light edges on something instead of using your white charcoal pencil. Once you have the outline of all your major shapes for your drawing, you can start with a little bit of shading. Now you don't have to go crazy with the detail of the shading here, just block out where you see really dark parts of the drawing and where the light parts are. You can kind of leave blank. I use the side of the charcoal pencil to get a little bit more coverage as I'm going. It's really tempting sometimes when making a drawing to draw what you think that you see rather than what you actually see. So for this mug, the top edge of the mug is actually pretty thick. But if I were to just look at the mug and then draw a picture without referencing back, then I might think it was a little bit thinner. So it's really important that you're constantly looking back and forth between your drawing and what you're drawing, your reference picture. You can see I'm using the smudger here, and what I'm doing with the smudger is I'm going over the parts that I drew in charcoal and I'm just smoothing them out. I'm smoothing out the edges. It's going to create value from one side to the other side. So when you're drawing with the charcoal, it's important to be thinking ahead to when you're going to be using the smudger so that you've got really nice dark sides where it's darker in the picture, and then you can pull it across with the smudger. It's tempting sometimes to think of shadows as exact replicas of the objects, but really they vary in shape depending on what they're laying across. So the shadow under the spoon is going to be bent because it's being reflected on top of the plate. Now that I've got pretty good coverage in charcoal over the whole drawing, I'm starting to squint a little bit at the original reference drawing so I can see where the really dark parts are, and then I'm going back to my drawing and I'm making them much darker than I had originally. Similarly, I'm looking for the really light parts of the drawing when I'm squinting, and this is a good point now that, again, I've got pretty good coverage on the drawing that I can bring out my white charcoal pencil and start highlighting some of the areas that are much lighter than they are in my drawing as they are in the reference drawing. Just like I did with the dark charcoal, with the white charcoal, I'm also going to be using the smudger to smooth out the edges. And now that I've got some black charcoal on the paper and I'm putting white charcoal on top of it, when I smooth it out, it starts creating mixed areas where it's grayer. And you can use that to your advantage. It's almost like you're painting on the canvas with the smudger. If you don't have a smudger, I probably should have mentioned this before, but if you don't, there are other things that you can use. You can actually use the eraser by pressing really lightly on the drawing without really trying to erase it. You can use it to blend. You can use your finger, which I know a lot of people like to do, but you know, it just ends up making a mess. You can also buy these little leather bits that you can use to blend the charcoal together as well, but I haven't really had a lot of experience where I liked using that. I'm pretty fond of using these paper smudgers. At this point in your drawing, you should be trying to smooth out some of the edges to make them a little bit more refined. So the areas that were crooked before, you should make them a little straighter, and specifically like sharp areas around the spoon, it's a good idea now to really define that edge and make sure that the dark edge of the spoon, if it's a dark edge or a light edge, is contrasted against the plate behind it. outlining everything. And almost for the rest of the drawing, what you're going to be doing is putting the detail where you haven't yet. You're going to be really looking for those lights and looking for those darks and looking for the reflections and highlighting those areas. You're going to be doing a lot of looking back and forth between your original drawing, the reference drawing, and your drawing to see where the differences lie. So it's almost like you want to hold them side by side and squint your eyes to see, okay, this is really light on this side, but I don't have it as light on my drawing, so I'm going to highlight that area, and keep going through different parts of the drawing to see where those areas are. Another professional tip, of course, is drinking lots of coffee while you're drawing. Especially if you're drawing a cup of coffee. Now for this drawing, I wanted the focus to be the cup and the saucer and the spoon, and really not the background. So I'm not going to go in and draw the wooden table that's underneath the cup and the saucer. I'm just going to shade it in and make sure that the shadows are there, but I'm not going to go into detail in the wood grain and the different slats, just to make it a little bit easier for this drawing. Don't be afraid to move your paper around too when you're drawing, especially when working with charcoal, because when you're working with charcoal, if you try to reach around, sometimes your hand can drag across the paper, and that's going to smudge areas that you put a lot of detail in and a lot of work and effort. So tip it upside down, move your body around, whatever it takes. Just make sure that you're not dragging across the paper. When you get to the point where you feel like your drawing is pretty much finished or almost finished, now's a good time to go back with the dark charcoal and the light charcoal and highlight those really special light lights and dark darks. Like I'm squinting my eyes and I'm looking for where the lightest spot on the reference drawing is, where the darkest spot is, and I'm using the charcoal and the white charcoal to find those spaces on my drawing too. Once you've got those final highlights in, the lights and the darks, it's up to you if you want to call it done. For me, I feel like I've got a pretty good drawing here, so I'm going to call it done. That's really one of the hardest things to do as an artist, is to figure out when you're actually done working on something. But I'm pretty happy with what I've got here, and I hope that you're happy too. So I want to thank you for watching this episode of Artiddle. Beginner drawing with charcoal pencils. Please, suggestions, comments, anything, put them below in the YouTube video, or if you want to email me on the website at artiddle.com, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.